I feel it. Do you feel it? The music? That's good because at the beginning, middle, and end today, we're going to have a lot of it. And part of the music we feel down in our soul is what we are also feeling with our minds open today and our hearts open. And can you feel that in this room today? And part of the reason you may feel that energy and that vibration so much today is because we had quite a week this week. Quite a week. It was a deep dive for many folks in this room, to say the least. And something known as Spiritual Education Enrichment Week, otherwise known as Spiritual Boot Camp, otherwise known as C Week. But it was an incredible, phenomenal happening, and I asked people at the 9 o'clock service just to give me a word of what, if you participated this week, give me a word that comes through your consciousness of how you would describe it, the week. If you could just say one word, what does it mean to you? Just popcorn it out right now. Okay, let's popcorn it out maybe more one at a time. Okay, let's try that. Let's see. Go ahead. Fabulous. Life-changing. Awareness. Fun. You mean we can have fun here? Is that real? I don't know. Enlightening. Yeah. And breakthroughs. And it's always interesting for me to even stand up here and try to explain what a week like this can mean in your life and what it is like. And so I enjoy watching you when you try to describe it. And you gave all these beautiful shares yesterday. But it usually started with a hesitation like, how do I put this into words? You know? And that's what the spiritual experience really is about. And Geo's going to talk about that today. What's coming forth from Source, from us, the one presence and the one power. And so this came forth for many of you this week. And it came forth from you in many different ways, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But first, shouldn't we really have the teachers stand up that participated? Please, stand up. Yay. And Lisa Walker, where are you? Stand up, special recognition. She might be working around the corner, but she was my right arm this week, just in there. Tell her we clap for her. And also, so if you are one of the people that we're just trying to describe what this experience was like, we had 92 participants at last count by Lisa, 92 participants plus the teachers plus the helpers. And if you were one of those folks that had the courage to show up and be brave this past week, please stand up. Hey, beautiful. Here. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's so indicative of the growing consciousness of this church, and to see folks evolve and to change. And I said we're going to sing in the beginning, middle, and end. We're going to close out the service today in a totally different way with one of our special guests that came from Massachusetts this week. And she told me in the hallway a while ago, she said, it feels like I feel kind of weepy, like I'm leaving summer camp. You know, that kind of feeling of the love. And speaking of love, I also want to thank my in-laws, Jim and Elizabeth Mativier, for being here this week. Yeah. And having the courage to show up midway through C Week, which is a big deal. And also, we got to share. We were having tears come out last night, sharing what the week meant. And so thank you for being here. And one last little thing. Last night we had it. You may have been weeping because the party was over, too, because we actually did get to have the party. KK did celebrate her first birthday in style. Yep. The weather cleared. It was beautiful. We had a great sunset, and it was gorgeous. So thank you for sharing that in our home with us, those of you that got to come. So last little story before I quit. I said that we're going to have singing that revealed itself from a student this week at the end of the service. But also, you know, what Geo's talking about, things coming forth that maybe you never even dreamed were possible in your life. And so I'm starting the 5 agreements next week not the 5 agreements, excuse me, the 5 principles. 5 agreements will be later in the year. The 5 unity principles. And to see where you are with these principles in your life and how much are they coming forth and demonstrating in your life. And sometimes they come out in a way you wouldn't expect it, such as, I don't know, one day you find out that you're actually a pretty good painter and you didn't know that before. Would you hand me this painting right here? This is from a close friend of mine who had here, I'll do a little reveal, hold on. But someone who had every reason not to drive from Little Rock to come here this week with health and family challenges and different things going on, but she made it anyway, not expecting that somehow throughout the week this would come through her from her creative, divine ability. Yeah. That's spirit in action to me. And perfect picture, wouldn't you say, to introduce our very special guest speaker today. I've just come to love you more every year, and I've loved the way I've seen you grow as I have grown throughout these last several years. And so I appreciate the dedication this week to teaching, and I appreciate what you're going to share with us today. The senior minister of Unity of Windward in Hawaii for the last almost 8 years now. Please welcome a warm Unity of Dallas welcome for Rev Geo Downer.
Thank you. I accept. That's one of the things that I got to learn from Unity Principles was a willingness to accept. We're not really in the whole process if we're always giving. I was taught that it was important for me to give and give and give. But one of the things that I get to also learn is to accept. That's the whole thing. Giving and receiving are one in truth. That may be news to some of you, and it may be old news to many of you. But this morning, I'd like to give you a little picture of how exciting it is for me to be standing here in this moment. I've had a week filled with delight and wonder, and there's been a few moments of absolute terror. Oh my goodness, how did this happen? One of the things that this church has been committed to is spiritual education and enrichment. And James Buchanan has brought that here. Reverend James Buchanan has held that as a vision. It's been a beautiful realization for me to see him have that be something that takes place in this community, because I get to be a part of it. And it's also something that is and was a vision of a man who was incredibly impactful to both of us. His name was Guy St. John. Many of you know of him. He held a vision that this movement would be a spiritual education and enrichment movement. So I want to get back to the root as well as who held the vision in addition to James, in addition to Sky. It's the board of this community. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Board of Trustees as they presently are and the previous Board of Trustees. If you served on the Board of Trustees, I want to acknowledge you for holding the vision of seeing spiritual education and enrichment take place in this community. Please stand up where you are. So see, it's the whole thing, and before it's over, I'm going to ask every single one of you to stand up and accept. Okay, maybe not. This has been an absolutely amazing week, and I've been truly, truly blessed to be in the experience of this. I'm also truly blessed to say that I am at home. Now, many of you already know, you've heard this from me before, that when I left Dallas, Texas, I said, I will never come back here. And I think it's really wonderful that Spirit gives me such a wonderful twist that I'm standing here and saying, this is my home. Not only is this my home, I also come from an absolutely beautiful, amazing place that is my home. It's a series of islands that's out in the middle of the Pacific. And this series of islands is truly magnificent. Now that I've done a few unabashed plugs, I'm going to be doing some more unabashed plugs. Come see me. Come visit me. And come see an incredible place to be. It's your home. It truly is. And I would love for you to join with your spiritual community and go on this trip to Hawaii, to hang out on the beach in Waikiki, and also to come over to the windward side of the island where it rains every single day. Come home. You know, the funny thing is that we think home is a place that we go to. But I want you to recognize that home is right here in your heart. Home is this place where you take a moment to breathe in and breathe out. Most of us don't recognize that. I'm going to ask you to join me with me in an affirmation. And usually when I do ask people to join with you in an affirmation, I have it on the overhead. But this is an easy one. The whole wide world is my home. Would you proclaim that with me? Let's say it out loud together. The whole wide world is my home. So come home. This whole wide world is your home. There's so many voices that speak to separation. As a matter of fact, we all go through our lives. Well, this is a good experience, and this is a bad experience, and this is a good situation, this is a bad situation. I'm going to ask you to come home, to come into a place of oneness. Every single Sunday morning in this church and in Unity churches all through the Unity movement, people say, there is only one presence and one power, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, the funny thing is that I recognize that most of us, when we come to church, it's like, there's only one presence and one power. I don't really know what that means, but... So I'm actually standing here because I think it's really important that we recognize that this means coming home. I actually had, thank you, Lisa, for delivering the Unity class later today. What is Unity? Because I actually had someone come to the Unity Windward member orientation. And he said, you know, I really like Unity. I like a lot of the things that take place here. I really enjoy it. But you know, this thing about oneness, I don't really get that. And I was like, oh, well. So that's how my work gets to be cut out for me. And it's also the very thing that we seem to miss sometimes. It's a wonderful thing that we have these spiritual principles, but spiritual is not out there. It's in your life. It's what's taking place now. There really is only one presence and one power. It's active in your life, and it's also active as your life. So that's the one thing that I want to at least convey over the course of this last week, that this presence and power is absolutely everywhere. And your home is right here in the heart of Texas, and your home is also in the heart of Hawaii. No matter where you go in your life, you can make a decision to know that you are absolutely in the right place at the right time, right now. That's a decision. That isn't something that just happens, that we just kind of bump into from time to time. It's a way that we can awaken to the truth of who we are. Sometimes circumstances distract us from that. But I'm going to ask us to redirect our attention to the truth of who we are. the truth of what is your home in God, right here within you. There's the circumstances of a lady's life that I'd like to point you to. She's a truly spectacular, amazing woman. Her name is Mary Kavena Pukui. She was born into a mixed-race family at a time when that was not really all that okay. She was born into a family of a haole father and a native Hawaiian mother. And haole's the white guys like me. And Mary Kavena followed in the tradition of the Hawaiian people in that she was raised by her grandparents. And although she faced some difficulty in life, she also recognized that her culture and her tradition held some rich, wondrous possibilities. She put together a book called Olelo Noeau, which is a combination of wisdom sayings, poetical sayings. It's proverbs that were handed down amongst the Hawaiian people. And now, for those of us who are from the South, we also have wisdom sayings and poetical sayings. We may not recognize them for what they are. Like, for instance, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now, you don't recognize necessarily that that's a proverb. And as a 4-year-old, the first time I heard that was, why would anyone want to do that? However, there are wisdom sayings that get handed down, that get shifted around, and we oftentimes don't pay that much attention to them. But it's very much like the manner in which oneness shows up. We don't maybe pay that much attention to it. Yeah, okay, that's never... One presence, one power. So I'm going to invite you to, the next time that that's said in this church, to actually bring a little bit more oomph, and I'm hoping that I'm going to inspire you into that possibility this morning. Mary Kavena knew that there were these wisdom sayings that were handed down that maybe didn't have the impact that they can in our lives. And she put them all together in this book known as Olelo Noeau. And one of the ones that I'd like to look at this morning is Mai ke kumu aka wēlau. Of course, you were thinking that earlier, actually. Maybe not necessarily in those words. Kumu is a word that means root or base or foundation. Now, the beautiful thing about the Hawaiian language is that it never means just one thing. It's intimations, it's context, it's texture. You see, whenever they make a statement, it's not just a double entendre. Generally, in the Hawaiian language, it's a triple or a quadruple entendre. So kumu actually means root or base or foundation, in addition to teacher. Who is our teacher in Unity? I've already made reference to Reverend Sky St. John, who is our teacher in at least James and I have that in common, and you have that in common as well. But we also have a teacher in the master teacher, Jesus. It's kind of exciting being in here in Texas. The singers were singing about Jesus. That doesn't happen all the time in Unity churches, you know. That's pretty cool. They're singing about Jesus. That was awesome. But that's our teacher. It's our roots. It's our foundation. It's the kumu from where we come. And it's the one presence and one power that's active in your life. The one presence and one power that's active as your life. So the remainder of the phrase is aka wēlau. Wēlau is actually the leaves. So mai means from, essentially. Ke kumu means root. Aka wēlau, which means the leaves, what basically comes down to from the trunk to the leaf buds. The whole thing. Or as we would say, the whole thing. what does that have to do with our lives? It has to do with what we base and found and ground ourselves in. Do you base and found and ground yourself in God? Or do you base and found and ground yourself in the leaves? Our life situation can sometimes distract us into focusing on the leaves rather than focusing on the base or the trunk. Our master teacher, Jesus, followed a particular spiritual pathway. It was known as Judaism. And the foundation of Judaism is the Shema, which essentially says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." There's only one presence and one power. Maybe you've heard someone tell you, there is only one God. Oh, wow, I couldn't agree with that more. There really is only one God, and there's so many wondrous pathways that we can take in order to experience and be in that one God. So you see, from the trunk to the leaf buds, there's this immense variety that we can recognize in our lives and in our world, but it's founded and grounded in the one base, in the Shema, which is the basis of the religion and spirituality that Jesus lived in and that Jesus taught. This idea of the Shema has an impact in all of our world. Judaism has certainly had an impact on Christianity. That's a weird thing for a minister to say. However, you have had an impact on the entire world. But sometimes you don't pay attention to that. Sometimes you think the leaves are more important than the root of who you are. Today, I'd like to invite you to recognize that you are founded and grounded in a spiritual principle, a wondrous and amazing expression where you can be at home no matter where you might be, no matter who you are. In this tradition of Judaism, it's a wonderful thing that despite all of the voices that point to the leaves, that tell us about separation and fear, that tell us about conflict, we can instead recognize the truth that's taking place in our world. If we're willing to listen, if we're willing to found ourselves in God and know that we are in that protection and comfort and peace place. You see, the Hebrew people knew this whenever they looked at a particular truth. How truly wonderful and delightful to see brothers and sisters living together in sweet unity. This comes from the Psalms. This is taken from the Passion translation of the Bible. There are so many different translations of the Bible that look at the original text in order for us to be awakened to how these spiritual principles were conveyed. So isn't it wonderful that brothers and sisters are gathered together in sweet unity? That you can be in sweet unity in this sanctuary? That although there may be some shifting and difficulty in our world, we can come together as one consciousness. That although I may live in a faraway place, we recognize that we're in this together. That although some people may call God by a different name, we can acknowledge and recognize that we are together in sweet unity. That founding and grounding of the one principle, the one presence, is here, now. The master teacher Jesus was speaking to that when he once said, the kingdom is not discovered in one place or another, for God's kingdom realm is already expanding within some of you. Those of us who are open to it, those of us who are willing to be awakened to it, know that it's already within us. This kingdom of heaven that Jesus spoke to is living and moving and breathing as you. And that's the one presence and one power that's active in your life. I'm delighted that James is speaking to these 5 basic unity principles throughout the month of April. I'm especially delighted because I get to speak to the first one. It's my favorite. It's the one that's the most fun. Because you see, even though there's all the stuff that seems to go on in our lives, I'm never going back to Dallas. We can recognize that that oneness can show up in amazing, surprising, incredible ways. You've got something like that in your life too. Where you made a decision at separation. Maybe it was for protection. Maybe it was for fear. Maybe it was because of a resentment. But that decision that you've made is just asking and calling for you into an awakening of how it can come into a greater sense of wholeness for you. Most of the time, what we look at in religion, unfortunately, is how do we make sure that we go toward the good and away from the bad? You know, that's an important principle, but the more important thing, and this is kind of interesting, it's all good. I'm not talking about wet noodle spirituality where it's all good, it's all God, okay, thank God. No, I'm talking about the courage and the bravery that it takes to recognize that God is present in every circumstance, in every situation. That even though we may label it one thing or another, the truth is, the absolute truth is, that God is moving us into a higher evolution of who we can be and who we already are. That's how we recognize that the kingdom of heaven is here and now and already present within us. This one presence and one power, it isn't absent. This one presence and one power doesn't show up once you're done with all 365 lessons in A Course in Miracles. It's here now. It isn't once you've completed all the SEE coursework. It's here now. Oh my God, who did that? I was in Texas and they gave me an amen. It's here now. And we get an opportunity to live that. Oh, I'm evangelizing up here. Yes, honey, I was looking at you. Let's recognize that God's presence is moving in us and that it's coming forth in ways that are unexpected, but it's already here. Let's open our eyes and awaken to this wondrous possibility. The Bible and the teachings of the Gospels, the good news, have had a wondrous impact on my life, and I would venture to guess that since we're living in the South, it's had a wondrous impact on all of us. But there are numerous other pathways by which you can awaken to the truth that's within you. One of those ways is from A Course in Miracles. I've already made reference to it. And it says in the text, the word within is unnecessary. The kingdom of heaven is you. What else but you did the Creator create? And what else but you is his kingdom? You are the kingdom of heaven. It's not something that we wait for. It's happening now. Are we awakening to that? Are we living that? May we at least go into our lives and in our world and be willing to recognize that even in the difficulties that may show up, where there may be conflict, it's an opportunity for connection. Can I listen? Can I be willing to be present? Can I be willing to at least acknowledge that God is here, living and moving and breathing as every one of us? There is really only one presence and one power. And it shows up in our consciousness when we're willing to embrace the whole of it. Okay, it doesn't show up when we're doing that. It's easier to see when that happens, actually. It's even present when you're not willing to see it. Charles Fillmore knew this when he spoke to a definition of what he called wholeness. Wholeness is the perfect unification and expression of man as spirit, soul, and body. True healing means to make whole. In this last week, I've had the pleasure and the honor to teach an SEE course known as Healing and Wholeness. But what the beautiful things that I've gotten to walk away with this week is a deeper awareness of how I can consistently and constantly be invited into awakening to my wholeness. There's something more to embrace, something more to love. There's something more for me to recognize the truth of. Sometimes that may feel a little frightening. However, the honesty is that I can take the courage from within me in order to embrace all of life. And I'm enriched and enlivened and invigorated from that. Many of us have had an experience in our life where we have a sense or a feeling of an illness that shows up in a physical way or an emotional way, a spiritual or a mental way. But Charles Fillmore is inviting us to take all of that and bring it into our wholeness. More importantly, Jesus was inviting us to do that as well. Because Charles Fillmore stands on the shoulders of Jesus' teachings. Charles Fillmore was very strongly influenced by Jesus, but he was also influenced by a very important woman. Her name was Myrtle Fillmore. She once wrote that the power that created you is at work to restore you and maintain you in wholeness. You know, what's funny about that is that sometimes in our lives we don't notice that power is moving in our lives to restore us and maintain us in wholeness. No, I want to see separation instead. It's when we eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is good and this is bad, and I don't really want the wholeness experience. Let's have the courage today to be in a whole experience. Let's recognize that courage is happening in all of our life, in all of our experience. An amazing teacher by the name of Eric Butterworth once wrote that God is the allness of wisdom, allness that is present in its entirety at every point in space at the same time. So God is present where I am, right here, right now. Eric was not writing about just Eric. He was writing about you. God is present right here and right now. It's going to take a little bit of courage and a little bit of moving and flexibility that's necessary for us in order to embrace the entirety of life. But in this spiritual foundation, in the founding and grounding in God, it's possible. You see, there's nothing impossible about any of this. Sometimes we think about peace in this spiritual community. Of course, we envision it. And then we go home and we're standing at the kitchen washing the dishes and thinking, wow, I'm not so sure how peace is going to show up. Peace is going to show up because of you. You are the central focus of power. And even though those doubts may show up when you're cleaning the cat box, when you're taking the garbage out to the street, just through our common everyday life, we can recognize the importance of knowing that God is here right now. And I can shift my attention, I can shift my awareness into embracing and loving all of life. Love is the only transforming power. That maybe that might have been the reason why Jesus pointed to it so frequently. It's the very thing that will make a difference in our world and create the peace that's meant to be. Let's do that in wholeness. Let's do that in awareness. Life is moving as you. Eric Butterworth had something more to say about that when he once wrote, God is life, and the whole of life is present in its entirety at every point in space at the same time. Can you expand your mind in that way? For most of us, that completely blows our mind. Yet there's that one presence and one power that is at every point in space at the same time. So I'm hoping that next Sunday, or whenever you happen to think of it, that when you consider that there is only one presence and one power active in the universe and in my life, God the Omnipotent. By the way, the good part, that's omnipotent. There is no bad. There's good and there's the other good. The other good gives us an opportunity to explore and discover and embrace it in a way that brings us into wholeness. I'm not advocating wet noodle spirituality, but I am advocating the possibility of courage and bravery that's required in order for us to truly love our lives, our world, each other, and all that is possible. The co-founder of the Unity movement, Myrtle Fillmore, knew this when she once wrote that God is life. We make that life into living. God is love. We make divine love into loving. God is substance. We take the substantial reality and bring it through into the manifest world. You see, we hold this divine idea within us, and then we bring it out into the world through loving and living and substantial reality, through manifesting whatever it is we'd like to create in our world. So when I found and ground myself in the truth, in God, when I recognize that the only kumu that is God, then I step myself up into a recognition of the kumu. We are all masters. We are all teachers and students to one another. Mai ke kumu, ake wēlau. Seems like a strange mixture of sounds and syllables. But it has a vibratory sense of recognizing that from the trunk to the leaf buds, all of my life is a blessing. The whole thing. I mentioned earlier that the teachings that Jesus followed was founded in something known as the Shema. It's a recognition when we can see, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. I'd like to share that with you in the way that the master teacher Jesus likely also heard it and may have sung it as well. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. It's a vibration. It's a vibration. It's a movement. It may sound like strange sounds, but as we raise our vibration, we raise our awareness into the oneness of life that's meant to be. The oneness of life and love and wisdom that's living and moving and breathing as you. Let's go forth from this gathering on Sunday to recognize that church is everywhere we go. That God is everywhere we go. Let's celebrate the wonder of good. Let's celebrate the wonder of omnipotence, more importantly. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for being the presence of God and the hand of God in this world. I accept. Thank you.